Picture this. It's Friday morning, you wake up, check your phone, and see that beautiful direct deposit notification. You feel rich, you feel safe. You decide to order the extra large latte, maybe browse Amazon for a bit. But then Monday rolls around. You open your banking app and you just kind of squint at the screen. You know the money was there, but between the auto pay for the credit card, the random Venmo request you approved, the 3 subscriptions you forgot to cancel, and the rent, you're suddenly back in the danger zone. You aren't broke because you don't work hard. You feel broke because your financial life is cluttered, bloated, and honestly way too complicated. You're drowning in what I call financial noise. My name is Scarlett, and I spend way too much time thinking about financial minimalism and system efficiency. If you're someone who feels like you're constantly juggling bills just to keep the lights on, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing. Most people think being good with money means having a complex spreadsheet with 42 different columns, checking the stock market every hour, and having 6 different savings accounts labeled for everything from emergency to future dog's vet bills. But actually, that's exactly why people fail. Complexity is the enemy of execution. The more moving parts your financial machine has, the more likely it is to break. Today, I'm going to walk you through the minimalist money rules that I personally use and that I've forced my friends to use to automate stability. We're going to strip away the junk so you can finally breathe. Let's start with the psychology of why we overcomplicate this. Humans have a bias toward addition. When we have a problem, like not saving enough, our instinct is to add a solution. Open a new account, download a new budgeting app, start a new side hustle. But in finance, subtraction is almost always more powerful than addition. This brings us to minimalist rule number 1, the one-way valve structure. Look, the average American has something like 15 different financial accounts if you count credit cards, checking, savings, loans, and investment platforms. That is a logistical nightmare. Every time you have to transfer money manually from account A to account B to pay card C, you are introducing a decision point. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. If you have to make 10 small decisions about your money every month, you will eventually make a bad one. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So here's the math of the one-way valve. You need to consolidate your entire financial life into one primary checking account, just one. All income flows here. This is the mouth of the funnel. Now, you might be thinking, Scarlett, isn't that dangerous? Won't I spend it all? No, because you're going to automate the exit. You need to treat your checking account like a train station, not a parking lot. Money arrives and it immediately gets on a train to leave. Let's say you take home $4,000 a month. Most people leave that $4,000 sitting in checking and try to spend responsibly throughout the month, hoping something is left over for savings at the end. That never works. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available, while spending expands to fill the balance available. If you see $4,000, your brain thinks you have $4,000 to spend. Instead, on the first of the month, you set up an automatic transfer. $400 goes to investments, $200 goes to high-yield savings, $2,000 goes to fixed bills. You do this before you buy a single groceries item. You artificially lower your income. You force yourself to live on the remaining $1,400. You are essentially hiding money from yourself. This leads directly to minimalist rule number 2, and this is where it gets really interesting because it pisses a lot of people off. Rule number 2, the 50% hard cap. We need to talk about your overhead. In business, if a company has high overhead, high rent, expensive leases, high salaries, it goes bankrupt the second the market dips. Your life is a business. Here's what most people don't realize. Financial stress doesn't come from buying too many $5 coffees. It comes from your fixed monthly commitments being too high relative to your income. I want you to add up your rent or mortgage, your car payment, your insurance, your minimum debt payments, and your utilities. These are the bills you must pay to exist. If those numbers add up to more than 50% of your take-home pay, you are mathematically fragile. Let's run the numbers. If you make that same $4,000 a month, your fixed costs should be strictly $2,000 or less. If your rent is $1,800 and your car note is $500, that's $2,300. You're already at 57% before you've eaten a single meal or put gas in the car. When you break the 50% rule, you eliminate your margin for error. If your car breaks down or you get a parking ticket, you have to use a credit card because your cash flow is suffocated by your overhead. Now, I know some of you are screaming at your screen right now, but Scarlett, rent is expensive. I live in a city. I can't get it under 50%. I get it. The economy is tough, but math doesn't care about the economy and it doesn't care about your feelings. If you are at 70% fixed costs, you have two choices. You either make more money or you make a radical change to your lifestyle. And I mean radical. Roommates, selling the car, moving. Financial minimalism isn't about deprivation, it's about agility. You cannot be agile if you are carrying a 2,000-pound backpack of fixed costs. This segues perfectly into the third rule, which addresses the stuff that fills up our lives and drains our wallets. Minimalist rule number 3, the cost per use audit. We live in a consumerist culture that tells us the initial price tag is the only thing that matters. We see a shirt on sale for $20 and think, what a steal. We see a high-quality pair of boots for $300 and think, I can't afford that. But this is poverty thinking. Minimalists focus on value, not price. There's a concept called the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. Basically, a wealthy person buys $300 boots that last 10 years. A poor person buys $30 boots that fall apart in 6 months. Over 10 years, the poor person spends $600 on boots and still has wet feet, while the wealthy person spent $300 and has dry feet. To be financially stable, you have to stop buying clutter that has a high cost per use. Here's the formula I use before I buy anything over $50. I take the price of the item and divide it by the number of times I will realistically use it in the next year. If I want to buy a $200 blender because I swear I'm going to get into smoothies, I have to be honest. Will I use it? Maybe 10 times. That's $20 per smoothie. That is a terrible financial decision. That is just clutter. But let's say I need a new laptop for work. It costs $1,500. That's a lot of money, but I will use it 8 hours a day, 250 days a year for 4 years. That's 8,000 hours of use. The cost is 18 cents per hour. That is a phenomenal investment. When you start viewing your money through the lens of cost per use, you naturally stop buying junk. You stop browsing the clearance rack at Target for things you don't need. You start saving up for the few high-quality items that actually add value to your life. This clears out your physical space and your bank statement. You'll notice fewer transactions, but the transactions you do have will be meaningful. But wait, because we have to address the elephant in the room. We've talked about structure, overhead, and spending, but what about the impulsive brain, the part of you that sees a notification and just reacts? That brings us to the psychological trap that keeps 90% of people broke and the minimalist rule that fixes it instantly. That trap is called frictionless spending. Companies spend billions of dollars to remove every single barrier between your desire and your purchase. One-click ordering, Apple Pay, stored credit card info, that isn't convenience, that is a trap designed to bypass your logical brain and tap directly into your lizard brain. So, minimalist rule number 4 is simple. Reintroduce the friction. I want you to delete your credit card information from your browser autofill. Delete the shopping apps from your phone. Unsubscribe from the marketing emails that tell you about a sale on items you didn't know existed 5 minutes ago. Here is the 72-hour rule I live by. If I see something non-essential that I want, I add it to a list on my phone. I am not allowed to buy it for 72 hours. Now, you might be thinking, Scarlett, that sounds tedious. Why does 72 hours matter? Because neuroscience tells us that the dopamine spike, that rush of excitement you get from wanting something, fades after about 48 to 72 hours. If you still want it 3 days later, it's a genuine desire. If you've forgotten about it, you just saved yourself money. I once tracked this for a month, and I realized I saved $600 just by waiting 3 days. That is $7,200 a year. That's a used car. That's a dream vacation. That is a fully funded Roth IRA, all from just waiting 3 days. Rule number 5. Boring is best. This brings us to investing. And oh boy, this is where people really overcomplicate things. They think they need to be the Wolf of Wall Street, watching charts, buying crypto at 3 a.m., and reading earnings reports. Let me be incredibly clear. If your investing strategy is exciting, you are doing it wrong. Minimalist rule number 5, the one fund portfolio. Most people lose money in the stock market not because the market is bad, but because they are human. They panic sell when it drops, and they FOMO buy when it spikes. The minimalist approach removes human error. You don't need 20 different stocks. You generally just need one broad market, low-cost index fund, something that tracks the S&P 500 or the total stock market. Here's the math. Over the last 90-plus years, the S&P 500 has returned an average of about 10% per year. Data shows that over a 15-year period, 90% of professional fund managers, people in fancy suits who do this for a living, cannot beat that simple index fund. If they can't beat it, you definitely won't beat it by trading on your lunch break. So, set up an automatic transfer. $100, $500, whatever you can afford. Have it buy that one boring index fund every single month, rain or shine. Think of it like planting a tree. You don't dig up the seed every day to check if the roots are growing, right? That would kill the tree. You water it, and you walk away. Rule number 5, the sleep well number. Finally, we have to talk about the foundation of all of this, the sleep well number. You probably know this as an emergency fund, but I hate that name. Emergency sounds scary. It implies disaster. I call it the Sleep Well Fund because that's what it buys you. Here is a terrifying statistic. According to Bankrate, nearly 60% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense with savings. That means if a tire blows out or a tooth chips, they have to go into debt. Minimalism is impossible if you're constantly putting out fires with credit cards. Your goal is to have 3 to 6 months of those fixed expenses we calculated earlier sitting in a high-yield savings account, not a regular savings account that pays you 0.01% interest. That is insulting. You need a high-yield savings account that pays you 4% or 5%. Now look, I know saving $10,000 or $15,000 sounds impossible right now, but go back to Rule 1. If you automate the savings first, you will get there. It might take 2 years. That's okay. The time is going to pass anyway. You might as well be rich at the end of it. When you combine these rules, the one-way valve, the 50% cap, cost per use auditing, friction spending, boring investing, and the Sleep Well Fund, something shifts. You stop worrying about money. I remember the first time I realized this system worked. My car transmission died. It was going to cost $2,500 to fix. In the past, that would have been a crisis. I would have cried, I would have called my parents, I would have lost sleep. But this time, I just looked at my Sleep Well account, transferred the money, and went back to eating my lunch. It wasn't a crisis, it was just an inconvenience. That is the power of minimalist finance. It turns mountains into molehills. Here's what I want you to do right now. Don't just close this video and go watch a cat video. Pick one of these rules to implement today. Just one. Maybe you go delete your credit card from Amazon. Maybe you set up that auto transfer for $50. Maybe you sit down and calculate your real fixed costs. Stability isn't about how much money you make. It's about how much efficiency you keep. If you want to dive deeper into how I automate my investments specifically, I have a full breakdown video right here. And hey, if this video helped you clear out some of the mental clutter, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe for more nonsense financial strategy. My name is Scarlett. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.